nutrition research, because I believe we are at a point where we can start to turn the tide on the chronic illnesses that plague Western society. And ultimately, they plague Western society because of the failure of the public health blunderers in D.C. and their crony friends in big business. And so we're in a very special time right now where we have the ability to start turning the tide. Millions and millions of people now know that keto is the best general diet fad in the neighborhood of diets for people to have results. Now, once you get into that space of keto, it's not just keto, it's the way you do it. It's avoiding the seed oils, there's a lot of keto foods that are low in carbs but high in omega-6 linoleic vegetable oils, right? And so there's a smart keto and there's a dumb keto, right? And I don't mean that like, you're a bad person if you don't do it the right way, but there's a way to do keto that's healthy, and there's a way to do keto that's not so healthy, or not as healthy, let's say. Certainly probably healthier than the veganism or the standard American diet, of course. That's really bad. And I think that if we get this right, I think we can fix a lot of the downstream questions that plague us, like how do we get people's diabetes under control? I saw recently Candace Owens, the political commentator, say, hey, if these COVID shots are so life-saving that they're free for everybody to use, for the public, why don't they do that for insulin? And I thought, she's making the case for universal health care on one level, but on another level, there's a different way to respond to it, which is if you get your diet right by getting rid of the omega-6 seed oils, processed flours, and sugars that our government wants us to eat because it helps their crony friends and their groupthink bureaucracies. If you get rid of that, you don't even need to use the insulin, perhaps, in that long-term. And again, I'm not giving you medical advice. I'm giving you what the science seems to suggest in the actual literature about the ways that linoleic acid, which is this oil, this fatty acid in vegetable oils, what it does to our bodies and what it does to disrupt our mitochondrial health, what it does to disrupt our, ability to process things like sugar. Dr. Kate Shanahan, who we've had on the program, she's a medical doctor, and she says that basically diabetics are in a state of blocked fat burn. Their body doesn't know how to burn fat. And so when they eat foods, it spikes their insulin level, which blocks their ability to burn fat for fuel, and then contributes to, hunger, and then sugar drops, and then over and over again, they need a snack all day. This is the situation for many Americans, not just diabetics. And it's a situation that we say, well, if we throw more billions of dollars at the public health experts in academia, Harvard and so forth, one day they'll figure it out. No, they won't. They've got biases that blind them from seeing what is really going on, which is that they've contributed to this problem for a long time with their erroneous pseudoscience advice for us to eat a new fabricated oil like vegetable oils and replace ancestral fats, ancestral animal fats and butter that people used to eat, coconut oil, healthier fats, to replace those that were time tested for thousands of years and people didn't have obesity. Go back and look at photos of people. They didn't have the epidemic of obesity that they have now. And there's a few factors that people raise. Some people say, well, people in the old days, 1930s or whatever, they exercise more than the average American. Well, that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of people that were commuting into work. They were on trains. They were sitting at an office in the 1930s. They weren't actually exercising more than the average person today. Another factor people raise is, well, they maybe they ate less calories. That's the big thing that a lot of people are still taught in dogmatic, official priestly sources of public health. They'll say, well, you got to just lower your caloric intake. Well, I'm going to bust that myth by reading this story in the blog Fire in a Bottle by Brad Marshall, who I've had on the show a couple times before to great interest. A lot of people love the things that he and I talked about. He talks about what's happened to our bodies, what's happened to our mitochondria, our little energy batteries in our cells, because we're putting the wrong type of fuel in it. It's not even a fuel. We should have never eaten these vegetable oils, but our government continues to persist in their delusional ignorance. The same thing like they do when they get caught doing the lab leak in terms of funding this. They totally hid that they were funding this lab, and now it's coming out. And then they totally hid it when evidence was suggesting that's where this virus came from. They didn't want us to talk about it. They said we're conspiracy theories. Now that's blown out. And how much more do we have to find out? That they persist in their ignorance and their lies to cover their own selves. They're doing that with our food, and that's actually the bigger story than COVID, right? Because if you get your food right, if you get your dietary standards right, and it is the food, it is the food. That's the big elephant in the room. If we get our food right, then we don't have to be sitting like sitting ducks whenever there's a pandemic. We will have a much better time of dealing with infectious diseases because we've got our vitamin D, we've got our different minerals and nutrient needs met, and we're not eating toxic, oxidative, inflammatory, unstable fats like vegetable oils. But Brad Marshall has this story that I found interesting. It's called Americans Ate a Lot in 1939. Torpor, sloth, and gluttony. This is in fireinaBottle.net. Brad Marshall's got a background in genetics, he's a geneticist by research in his study at, I believe, Cornell University. But let's look into some of the things that he says here. He says, between 1962 and 1991, the amount of linoleic acid in the American diet increased dramatically, due primarily to increases in vegetable oil and poultry consumption. And just like hibernating mammals, he says, we became torpid. We became low energy and storing fat. And he says food in 1939. The 1939 USDA Yearbook of Agriculture, Food and Life, has a chapter called Present-Day Diets in the United States. It goes into great detail about what people actually ate in the late 30s. White flour, sugar, meat, potatoes, vegetables, fruit, butter, milk, eggs. Lots of all of them. Much of the chapter is about people living in cities. He says, I'll focus on wealthy New Yorkers. The subway system opened in 1904. The first cabs became available in 1897. The first elevators were built in 1854. Jogging as a recreational enterprise wasn't invented until the 1960s, all of which is to say that a 60-year-old advertising executive working on Madison Avenue in 1939 would have been too old to fight in World War I, would have gotten to and from work on public transit, would have taken an elevator to his office where he sat at his desk. He would not have jogged in the evening. He would have been a more or less sedentary adult. This shows caloric consumption for different regions, and black versus white among men split up within regions by economic class. Wealthy people ate more. And he's showing some bars here that I can't show you if you're listening, But he says richer families could buy and eat more foods in all regions, and so they did. No one questioned it. I'm focusing on the wealthiest, but the median is around 3,500 calories. 3,500 calories a day. And so he goes on to say that if you made more money, if you were a wealthy person working at a sedentary job, like a banker, executive, lawyer, or whatever, you bought and presumably ate more food, and it was all to the good. How much food? 4,400 calories per day or so. At 4,400 calories per day, a sedentary male was expected to weigh 154 pounds. Look at that. But he says New Yorkers didn't even earn the crown of most calories. That honor went to those in Pacific cities buying 5,100 calories of food per day. This was the Great Depression. People from this era are notably frugal. I find it hard to believe that wealthy people in LA were buying 5,100 calories of food per day per person, only to throw half of it out. Okay? So they were eating butter. Mostly in the Pacific Ocean, they were eating lots of butter. And the Pacific region, I'm saying, in North Atlantic. In the South, people were eating more lard and salt pork, bacon for their fats. But they weren't eating vegetable oils, okay? They weren't eating vegetable oils like we do today. And so he says, how much do we eat now? According to the CDC, a nutrition requirement unit, that's another word for a person, eats this much, around 2,500 calories a day between the ages of 20 and 60 years old. So you see that? Now, how many people have been told their whole life to this day by the same experts that they know that the housing market's never going to crash? Oh, the same experts tell you there's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It's a slam dunk. Go and fight for this cause. It's a terrible moment. We could have anything blow us up in a moment. Same expert class that DC trots out, they get it wrong over and over and over again. And they're arrogant. They don't have any competition. Nobody keeps them competitive to get to the correct answers, so they just stick with their stupid answers. But how many people have been told, well, if you want to deal with the obesity problem, well, it's just people are too sedentary or they're eating too many calories. But this data suggests that people back in 1939 were eating anywhere from 3,500 to 4,000 something calories and beyond. Okay? And today, we're eating around 2,500 calories a day. But we have an epidemic of obesity and all the diseases that go with it. What's going on here? This is like a detective work. It doesn't take that much detective thought, but you got to think about this stuff. He shows photos of people. He was looking mostly at the wealthy because they could afford to eat, a lot of calories. And he's showing photos from people at the World Series 1939 Yankee Stadium. He's looking at the most expensive seats in the house, and you see everybody thin. Okay? So these are the folks that were eating 3,500 to 4,000 calories or beyond a day. Meanwhile, we're eating 2,500 calories a day, and we have an epidemic of obesity, which comes with diabetes, all the diseases that people are concerned about today, especially with this new pandemic as the comorbidities everybody talks about. So at what point are we going to say we're going to fire these experts? These public health experts are totally out of it. They're wrong. Fatally wrong. Catastrophically wrong. And we're not going to allow these people to keep misleading the future generations. We have to be adults. We have to stand up and fight for kids and the next generation, so that they don't have to be misled into the same disastrous results that we have, where we're eating way less calories. We've got this obsession with you've got to starve and all this stuff. Meanwhile, people back in the day were eating 4,000 calories sometimes, thin as can be, no problem with an epidemic of obesity and diabetes and Alzheimer's and all these terrible things that DC keeps saying, just trust us. We will solve it. We are your gods. We will solve it. You are not God, DC. You have failed. You have utterly failed. It's a disgrace what these people have done to monopolize the conversation and send people into a lifelong experience of catastrophic diseases and obesity. Shame on DC. Shame on them for misleading generations of people and lying every step of the way when they get called out by the facts and the science. I'm David Gronowski. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. We'll be back in just a moment. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended by full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. We're live on radio, FM, AM, podcast, and video stream. You can email me hello@aneighborschoice.com. That's hello@aneighborschoice.com. We appreciate your emails. Your feedback is always great. We love seeing people pour in from all over the different parts of the earth as they're excited about liberty. They're excited about science. They're excited about hope and positivity. That's what we stand for. Building family-friendly communities for the rest of our days. You know, that's what we're here for. It's to take care of the earth, to take care of those who depend on us to do what's right and to stand up for what's right. You know, I can't get anybody to want to, a lot of people just don't want to speak out. They're just scared. They want to go along and wait until, you know, the herd says it's okay to say something true. I mean, come on. What's the point of that kind of life? That doesn't get you anywhere. They think that'll make them richer that way. It won't. It won't. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of ways to make money selling nonsense and garbage, but at the end of the day, if you sell out for lies, it'll catch up to you. And, you know, there's just too many lies that we're swimming through every day to ignore it and to act like, you know, nothing to see there or whatever. This NPR story says U.S. life expectancy fell by 1.5 years in 2020, the biggest drop since World War II. Life expectancy in the United States declined by a year and a half in 2020, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which says the coronavirus is largely to blame. COVID-19 contributed to 74% of the decline in life expectancy from 78.8 years in 2019 to 77.3 years in 2020. It was the largest one-year decline since World War II, when life expectancy dropped by 2.9 years between 1942 and 1943. Hispanic and Black communities saw the biggest declines. For African Americans, life expectancy dropped by 2.9 years from 74.7 years in 2019 to 71.8 years in 2020. U.S. Hispanics, who have a longer life expectancy than non-Hispanic Blacks or whites, saw the largest decline in life expectancy during the pandemic, dropping 3 years from 81.8 years in 2019 to 78.8 years in 2020. So, you know, I was about to say, they will look, the only thing that the clown accusatory media does is they'll just look, oh, look, if black people have a bigger percentage drop, they'll say, hey, look, white supremacy did that. White supremacy. No, you stupid fools did it because you lied to everybody, including the black community, about the toxic nature of vegetable oils, you fools. I am tired of these people. We cannot mince words with these people. We demand change here. Harvard should be having people confront them for their perpetuation of ignorant pseudoscience lies that have catastrophic results on people's health. Talking about eating seed oils, canola oil, soybean oil, that's all they ever do is push for that nonsense. And the American Heart Association, the American Diabetes Association, all those groups continue to push the exact opposite of what you should be doing if you want to have a long life. I am sick and tired. The machine of the media only has one move. Accuse, 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 divide, divide, divide. That's all they ever do. But then you see Hispanics, they can't do that narrative. They'll do it. But of course, the narrative doesn't make any sense. Oh, white supremacy is what's causing. But you see Hispanics have a higher life expectancy on average, so they don't know how to fit that narrative in, so they won't say that. But all of that, I'm saying, is a distraction. That's all the media has, is to stir up envy and resentment amongst groups, to keep us divided against our neighbor. Meanwhile, we're all guzzling these seed oils that our stupid, idiotic DC Luddites keep pushing into the food system with the subsidies for the big food companies, and now the dumbest push of all, to eliminate red meat and replace it with fungal sludge trash from the pit of hell. Who in the blue world wants to eat this trash? These stinky, stupid, goop, sludge, fungal growth burgers in your mouth with seed oil sludge dripping into your mitochondria, breaking your little batteries. That's what they do. These seed oils go into your body and they destroy your little batteries. You can look at the light of your mitochondria. They flicker and dim when they're eating linoleic acid from the vegetable oils. It's disgusting what they're doing to this country. It's repulsive, and we're going to call them out. Left and right needs to get on board with this stuff, and let's get this poof of trash out of the food system once and for all, so we can watch as 90% of these big chronic disease illness problems start to dramatically reduce in this country as we remove these processed sugars and seed oils and get back to the way we should have been eating all along. Back in just a moment with more.
What's everyone saying about the all-new News Talk 1040 WHBO?
That's our big radio station, and it's one of the best news stations.
Dedication to the news and information.
Because I like to get the information from what I feel like is a pretty balanced perspective.
I enjoy it.
It's not just one-sided. It tells the full story.
I'm listening to it most of the day.
Every second I can.
Tampa Bay. The news and talk of Tampa Bay.
I just love that station.
News Talk 1040 WHBO.
Senate Republicans have blocked an effort to begin debate on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It fell short of the needed 60 votes to pass.
On this vote, the yeas are 49, the nays are 51.
Details of the bill are still ongoing, with a bipartisan group working to finalize ahead of a full vote. President Biden has arrived in Ohio, where he'll promote the infrastructure proposals today. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi rejecting 2 of the 5 recommendations for the January 6th special committee made by Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Pelosi says she won't accept GOP Representatives Jim Banks and Jim Jordan to sit on that panel, in a statement saying their appointments could impact, quote, the integrity of the investigation. That's caused House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy to pull all 5 members from the panel unless he says Pelosi accepts all 5. A new filter feature on Instagram lets users decide how much or how little sensitive content text comes up on the Explore tab. Latest change designed to give users more control. Michelle Frank.
A Neighbor's Choice is live. Glad to be with you as we are joined now by our friend Tucker Goodrich, who is a pioneering voice in the field of understanding this epidemic of chronic illnesses, these comorbidities that everybody's talking about in the news, but our public health officials are woefully incapable of just leveling straight with us and saying, you know what, we've done an exhaustive look at the science, the same papers that Tucker Goodrich has been talking about for years on podcasts and programs, and we're tired of it. It's time to have a public reckoning. It's time to have a renaissance of truth so that people can restore their health. Tucker, thanks for joining me on the program.
It's a pleasure, David, as always. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, and you know, when we look at this story here, you know, I'm looking at some of the comments on our live stream. It says, yes, it's Joseph says, it's all about the excess of linoleic acid, and the dogs, cats, chickens, pigs, and cows are being fed too much linoleic acid also. Linoleic acid should be 1% of our diet, not 30%. What's your take on this?
He's a smart guy, because they're, you know, the nutrition science people, and I put that in quotes, will give you lots of reasons why people are getting fat, that we're lazy, that we don't exercise enough, but that it's our genes. But that doesn't really explain why the same phenomenon is happening not only to our pets and to the animals that we keep in labs, but to wild animals that live in our cities, like rats and pigeons, and famously a raccoon up in Toronto who was getting very obese from going through the garbage. But none of this happens to wild animals living, you know, out in the actual wilderness, not eating human leftover junk food.
And that reminds me of the story that came out of New York City, that the rats were getting obesity. They were getting diabetes because they were licking that nasty, rancid, toxic seed oil sludge in the little trash alleys of New York City from the restaurants. They were just licking the heck out of that, and that was making those rats diabetic. They had no ability to function.
Well, it does the same thing to people, so it's hardly surprising. Although, you know, we get to eat in the restaurants, and the rats get to eat the garbage from the restaurants. But I tell you, I used to live in New York. You wouldn't believe some of those rats. quite frightening creatures.
Teenage Mutant Ninja rats and stuff, right? I mean, my goodness, what is going on in these cities? You know, people are tired of the nonsense, and yet so many people in the city seem to get it worst, and they cling to their abusers and their local governments for like a Stockholm syndrome. It's insane. I want to kind of set the table here with some thoughts. You know, you recently have a blog post here that you've put on yelling-stop.blogspot.com. Tell us a little bit about your newest story here, and we'll just kind of dive in.
Well, this is some comments on a podcast. Catherine Eban, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, so my Eban, I'll say. So my apologies to her. She's a journalist who's done some really excellent work. So she was being interviewed by this Dr. Peter Attia, who had interviewed her prior to discuss some of her excellent research into the generic drug fraud that the FDA has been essentially party to over the years. And she's finally gotten around to looking into some of the, you know, where did COVID-19 come from? And, you know, I disagree with her on some things, but I got to give the woman credit. She did a really good job and looked into a lot of stuff that nobody else is willing to talk about. And I think she's a little biased. I mean, she's a journalist, and she didn't go quite far enough, but she went much farther than most other people have been willing to go. And it's interesting because, you know, even this journalist, who I think did a pretty good job, her bias is pretty obvious in the article that she writes, and I go through that a little bit. I think she would have done a much better job, and she probably would have done this article a year earlier when I was first talking about what are the likely origins of the COVID-19 disease. But
so she's getting into the lab leak,
let me give some credit where it's due. She did she basically did a good job. There are just a couple of things that I took issue with, mainly that she wasn't addressing all the evidence.
Well, let's get into this, on the big picture view. If Donald Trump was caught funding chimeric superviruses in a Russian bioweapons lab, it would be the top story in the world, and the DOJ would perp walk every single person involved. That's Jack Posobiec at Human Events. Now, he's biased, he's conservative, but I think a lot of people were feeling that way, again, here we go again, this extreme double standard where if you're part of the cool crowd in D.C., you can get away with horrific, catastrophic decisions, and you get no scrutiny from the sycophantic press. So let's zero in on some of the facts that you think are important from this COVID story as you see it.
Well, and she even says, she actually says, with Trump out of office, it was a good time to begin to look into this. Trump out of office. What does Trump being in or out of office have to do with trying to figure out where this disease that's causing such hardship and death all around the world have to do with who's in the White House? Right?
Right.
What difference does it make? Okay, so that's a huge bias right there. She goes, but, fine. She's finally gotten to it, and she really does. There's a couple other pieces of bias. She goes on about, for a while, this. So back in 2014, the Obama administration, to their credit, put what they called a pause on gain of function research, which nobody had heard of back then, but now we're all familiar with it. And what they said was, we're not going to fund any new research of this sort. Existing projects are grandfathered, but we would like them to voluntarily stop this work, right?
Yeah.
Okay, not maybe as far as he should have gone, but reasonable. So he left it up to the head of each institution to basically enforce this themselves. And of course, the institution that was funding the Wuhan lab was the NIAID, which is, Anthony Fauci has been running since 1984, which is rather unbelievable that the guy's been around for that long. But anyway, Reagan appointed him, of all people. So as far as I can tell, I haven't seen any evidence whatsoever that anybody in the NIAID reached out to the Wuhan lab or their intermediary to the Wuhan lab, this guy, Peter Daszak, who was running this research program that the NIAID was, let's just say Fauci. It's easier. I can't keep going through that acronym that Fauci was funding, right? Apparently nobody went out and said, hey, maybe we should take a break here. They were in the middle of doing gain of function research and published in 2015 a paper talking about this new virus that they had created. And, Peter Daszak, the head researcher, said this new virus proves how dangerous the coronavirus could be, that it, is a real serious threat to humanity. Okay, well, maybe it'd be a good time to say, hey, let's stop this project, guys. Let's put it on hold. But they didn't do that. And the evidence for this is perfectly clear. You can go to the Health and Human Services website, and they list all the money that was given to this organization. Peter Daszak's organization is called EcoHealth Alliance, and then he gave it to the Wuhan lab. So every year we gave him more money. Even Anthony Fauci admits that we gave him money every year, so that's not even in dispute. So first question, why didn't we respect Obama's pause, right? Why was that not done? Now, the head of a funding organization like Anthony Fauci there were two things here. One, it was grandfathered, but, he had the authority to go and ask them to stop. Right. And obviously, apparently that never happened. He's never mentioned it. So they keep, they keep chugging along. And then in 2017, they lift the pause, right? This is now the Trump administration, of course. Unfortunately, Catherine Eban never mentioned, she mentions in passing in her article that they were funded the whole way through. In the podcast interview, she says, oh, there was a moratorium. Well, a moratorium is a halt. There was never a halt, right? They were grandfathered, or there could be exclusions. And then she turns around and says, and then the Trump administration lifted the moratorium. Well, except the moratorium had never applied to the Wuhan lab. So it's a little disingenuous to make that claim. And to try and, it almost sounds, although she doesn't explicitly do it, like she's trying to shift blame away from, the previous administration onto the Trump administration for restarting this. But they, of course, never restarted it because it was never stopped in the first place. So that's kind of a problem. So then we have this new regime that comes out, and so the idea was that organizations like Fauci's would have to go to the Health and Human Services and get approval to do this kind of research, right? And there's a nice video I saw on Twitter today from, 2018 or whatever, of Anthony Fauci coming out and saying, oh, this is such a great idea. I fully support this. Guess how many of these coronavirus research projects he submitted to this oversight regime?
How many?
0.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
So he had the opportunity to, go get it cleared, make sure it was safe. Didn't do anything. And we know that not because he's told us this, but of course, but because of the emails that were released recently in which he discusses it with one of his lieutenants, who says, oh, well, we didn't, as far as we know, we didn't put anything into this oversight protocol that we were supposed to use. So, okay. So then, so the whole moratorium thing, there really was no moratorium on the Wuhan lab. It's a little disingenuous to claim that. She does, if you go read her article, go through all of this and gets the facts pretty good, and does some really nice reporting of getting people saying that this whole oversight protocol on gain-of-function research was basically ignored by everybody, which apparently it was. There were a handful of projects, all concerning influenza, that was put in for approval, and we all know how that's turned out so far. But again, she does some really good research, even though she wasn't quite forthright on some parts of it. The other thing is she, Peter Attia, who's a smart guy, asks her, the director of the NIH, Collins, and Fauci have both denied categorically that they funded any sort of gain-of-function work, certainly not any in China, right?
Right.
So she replies, well, it's kind of tough to say. Did they fund it, or was it funded by this Peter Daszak guy? And she goes on to kind of say it's this gray area. So, okay, so I went and looked at the NIAID website, where they go through in great detail all of the requirements that somebody has to meet in order to get a grant from them. And of course, you have to be approved, and you have to, detail in, probably painful levels of detail what you're doing with the money. And one of the things that once you get a grant, you actually have a lot of latitude, but one of the things that you have to go back to them for and get additional approval for is if you start using a foreign lab, right? So this is a big priority issue in the NIAID. And for somebody to claim, oh, it's not their responsibility because it was secondhand, is belied by the NIAID's own protocols, which say, we want to know about this, we have to approve this. If you make a change, we have to approve the change. They clearly knew, based on that this work was going on. Additionally, they cited research. Then she said, oh, well, we don't know what data Peter Daszak was reporting back to Fauci, except that there are posts on the NIAID website talking about the work that the Wuhan lab was doing, right? And citing the research that they were published, in which, according to the NIAID's own definition of gain-of-function research, they were doing gain-of-function research.
Right.
So there's this argument that, it was, outside their purview, they didn't really have control over it. That's all nonsense. And they could have pulled this grant at any point if they really thought that something, that the protocols weren't being followed. Now, did they know that? Well, the State Department went to the Wuhan lab. This has been disclosed, I think, in the Washington Post over a year ago, that the State Department went to this lab and was really worried about it, and was so worried about it that they started sending people in to try and help clean the thing up and reporting back to Washington. Now, unfortunately, the reporting on the cables isn't all that detailed. We don't know how the State Department found out about this lab, but we can assume that, somebody knew that they were getting funding from an American government body, right? Otherwise, why on earth would the State Department go in there? They're not in the habit of just popping into random labs in countries around the world. So clearly there was some oversight on the ground over in China, and clearly it was getting reported back to America, and clearly nothing was done about it.
Let's hold that thought.
That was in 2018.
We're speaking with Tucker Goodrich. We're going to take a break and return, looking at this COVID story and some other stuff related to health and nutrition while we have them here for another segment. Stay with us. We're live on A Neighbor's Choice. Be right back.
Hello, this is David Kronosky with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality, grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
A Neighbor's Choice returns, and we're going to dive more into this seed oil story and the COVID story, it's all kind of connected together. It's just a big problem. We've got a comment from Robert who emails, David, I've been listening to your show for about 4 weeks now. I'm on board with you, starting to see the oil madness. Thank you for educating me. I'm telling everyone. Very good. Thank you for your enthusiasm for health and sharing the good news that we can take back our health. We don't have to sit like lemmings waiting for people to tell us what we're allowed to do and just making us sick the more they do it. Another, Sean Andrews, says, I love it when Tucker is on with you. I'm glad he is becoming a regular guest. My sincere thanks to you both. Thank you, Sean. So Tucker Goodrich, let's continue. Let's wrap up what you're wanting to say with the COVID story, the big points that you wanted to finish here. Just got a little bit of time.
Yeah, thanks to your listeners. That's really great. I'm so happy that they're finding this helpful. So then, Eban goes on about how Chinese aren't cooperating with the investigation, and then she mentions all the FOIAs that are going on against the NIAID and the National Institutes of Health, and she just kind of passes over the point that part of the reason we can't find out what happened isn't just that the Chinese aren't cooperating, it's that the federal government isn't cooperating. Fauci could answer a lot of these questions, and it's clear from his emails that he'd thought about a lot of these questions. He'd thought about where the virus came from. He knew that it was possibly coming out of this lab, and he promptly turned around in cahoots. And cahoots is a fair word in conspiracy with Peter Daszak, the lead investigator, to go out in public and say, nope, no chance it came from the lab. No chance. Don't worry about it. I mean, how, as you said at the beginning, how these guys aren't getting crucified. As you said, if this was a Republican administration that this had happened under, they would have gotten absolutely crucified. But it's, the swamp that's doing this, and the swamp protects itself. And a lot of journalists, unfortunately, are part of the problem. Yeah. And this is probably the most extreme example anybody could have ever hoped for of the swamp covering for itself and covering up what, could potentially be one of the greatest crimes in history.
4 million people, they've said, have died from this disease. And how many people have died? Millions from...
millions thrown into bankruptcy. You could go on and on all day. Large portions of the world are imprisoned in their countries, like, the Australians and the New Zealanders. There's nothing more important than finding out what happened here and making sure that it never, ever happens again. And from my research, there's no other evidence than that it came out of a lab like the Wuhan lab. And unfortunately, that happens to be the best candidate and the one that we were funding.
Yeah, and how many, if they had stopped funding it, it had a dentist level security standard, BSL2, biosafety level 2. So
yes,
that's pathetic.
And that's according to the woman who ran the lab, by the way.
It's just a shame, and hopefully this will be the turning point where we can finally start to move away from the 20th century model of health, which has been a catastrophe, and move towards a 21st century model that looks at prevention and looks at corrections that can be made, one of which, of course, that we talk about a lot is vegetable oils. We just got 2 minutes. Can you give us a little quick take on the connection between seed oils and blindness? We got some people who are listening.
So this is something I'm working on right now. The research points to the leading cause of blindness is age-related macular degeneration, and the evidence is that it's caused by seed oils, and it's caused, later in life. So a lot of us don't really worry about it because every young person thinks he's invincible and is never going to have any problems later in life. But it is the leading cause of blindness around the world right now. So to say that seed oils are the leading cause of blindness is not an unfair statement to make, and that's backed up even by research coming out of Harvard, which pushes seed oils really hard. But, they published this research that says that associated with blindness years back, and they just, I don't know why that's not a concern to them.
Got just a minute with you.
What's along, publishing research with the seed oil industry saying, no, it's wonderful. Eat more.
What's the proposed mechanism, if we just got like a minute, that the seed oils are causing macular degeneration?
Well, it's the same thing that happens in the rest of your body. They break down into toxins, and the toxins damage the tissues. In the eyes particularly, they are broken down by the light that you see. The blue light is strong enough to break these fats down into highly toxic metabolites.
Wow. So that's an interesting thing for people who've been eating decades of vegetable oil foods. Be careful about blue light exposure, right?
Yes, be careful about blue light exposure. And the leading treatment is blocking that pathway of vegetable oils breaking down and stimulating this chemical called VEGF, V-E-G-F. That's the main treatment, is blocking that pathway. So, I can't think of anything else in this field where it's as clear-cut a case of cause and effect as seed oils and blindness.
Yeah, it's we'd have to be blind to not look at this as a serious problem, because
well put.
Unfortunately, there's too many people who have a vested interest in what I call the horse and buggy, the horseshoe model of health, and they don't want to get out of the way for progress. But we're just going to have to make that progress anyways, because lives depend on it.
It's clear we can't trust the public health authorities.
Yeah, they've been discredited. Thank God for that, so we can get on to doing the right thing. Yelling-stop.blogspot is Tucker Goodrich's blog. Go check it out. We'll talk to him soon. And we'll also take a quick break. We'll return for hour 2 with Amy Povah to look at what Joe Biden's doing with the criminal justice disaster. Absolute failure, once again, from D.C. Back in a moment.
Your home for news, talk, and information. 1040 WHBO Pinellas Park. Tampa Bay's all new News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
From ABC News, I'm Michelle Franzen. In the Senate, a test vote to open debate on the bipartisan infrastructure plan failed, with Republicans blocking it, saying the working group is still finalizing details of the bill. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer trying to keep the bipartisan plan on track, along with the Democrats' budget reconciliation bill that's separate and something Republicans are against. Senate Minority Whip John Thune claiming it would add to the debt.
I don't think there's any appetite among our members to vote for a big increase in the debt limit when they're in the process of adding so much to the debt.
President Biden in Cincinnati this hour promoting both infrastructure plans. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy at a briefing today announcing he's pulling all GOP members he recommended for the January 6th Attacks Special Committee. That after he says House Speaker Nancy Pelosi rejected Representatives Jim Banks and Jim Jordan, 2 of his 5 choices.
I don't think there's any appetite.
The only way to reverse this is seat these 5.
Banks and Jordan both voted to overturn the election results on January 6th. Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who remains on the panel, defended Pelosi's decision.
There are 3 members that the minority leader proposed that the speaker did not object to. She has objected to 2 members. And the rhetoric around this from the minority leader and from those 2 members has been disgraceful.
A House investigation begins next week. Coronavirus cases on the rise in the U.S. The CDC says 8 out of 10 new infections are due to the Delta variant. In Tokyo, 2 days out from opening ceremony, Olympic athletes are also among those testing positive.
An American beach volleyball player tested positive shortly after arriving in Japan. The coaches won't even give the gender of the athlete out of privacy concerns, but say that he or she will be quarantined for at least a few days in a hotel. Both men's and women's beach volleyball kicks off on Saturday, with the USA men facing the Netherlands.
ABC's Jim Ryan reporting from Tokyo. You're listening to ABC News.
If you have unfiled taxes or are in debt to the IRS, this is important news. The IRS just rolled out a new program to help struggling taxpayers more easily resolve their tax problems. It's called the Taxpayer Relief Initiative, and it opens up powerful new options for people looking to get back on the right track with the IRS. And no one knows this program like the professionals at Optima Tax Relief, America's most trusted tax resolution company. They've resolved over $1 billion in tax debt for their clients and have the expertise and experience to help you. One easy call to Optima can start the process, helping to put an end to your worries of wage garnishment, asset seizure, and other aggressive IRS actions. Make today the beginning of your fresh start with the IRS. Call the experts at Optima Tax Relief now for your free confidential consultation.
Call 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460.
Optima Tax Relief. Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
The extensive wildfires burning in more than a dozen western states, causing poor air quality for people across the country, even as far as New York City. People in northern Minnesota also hit hard.
They actually had the worst air quality in the entire United States. And yes, it reached all the way down to Texas and Oklahoma as well, into New England. We're going to clear it out here in the Northeast, but it's going to come with severe storms. So damaging wind is the main threat if you're in Delaware, up through New Jersey, even Boston.
ABC's news chief meteorologist Ginger Z. Millions going to the victims of the Surfside building collapse.
A judge ruled Wednesday that $150 million in initial compensation will go to victims and families who suffered losses in the collapse of Champlain Tower South. That includes insurance on the building and expected proceeds from the sale of the property. In his ruling, Miami-Dade Circuit Judge Michael Hansman said that does not include any proceeds from the numerous lawsuits already filed since the collapse on June 24th, adding that those lawsuits are being consolidated into a class action that would cover all victims and family members if they choose. Lionel Moyes, ABC News, Miami.
Tourists will now need a COVID pass to visit the Eiffel Tower or visit museums and movie theaters. This is the first step in the French president's campaign against a rise in the Delta variant infections there. New measures prompting a number of protests across France. This is ABC News.
O'Reilly. Ready for your next road trip? Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts to get everything you need to stay safe while traveling. Visibility on the road is so important and so easy to achieve. Get your windshield streak-free and crystal clear with Blue Magic Glass Cleaner. On sale now, 2 for $5. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit O'ReillyAuto.com.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
I'm Michelle Franz in ABC News.
Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
Mental illness is up dramatically since the epidemic hit America. Consider this from the Holy Scripture.
Prepare your minds for action, and being sober-minded, set your hope full on the grace that will be brought to you. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13.
Are you sober-minded? Do you think there's no hope? There is, and it's waiting for you at your local church. There you'll find a healthy mindset that will give you strength and wisdom. The welcoming committee is there waiting for you. See you soon.
You're listening to the most electrifying show in media. A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gronowski. So glad to be with you as we join again live across Radio Land and podcast, video stream for another fun conversation, looking at the news, guided by principles, not tribalism. And that's what we do here. And that means we're going to go where the facts lead. We're going to go where the truth is, because that's the whole point of being an adult, is that you're not going to shrink away from the truth. You're going to boldly explore it, especially when lives are at stake. And speaking of, they keep talking, if you listen to the ABC propaganda Pravda report on radio, for those listening on radio, you would notice that they keep pushing the Delta scare, Delta. Well, let's look at the data. So let's look at the data of what's going on over in Israel. And, we're getting this from data.gov.il. Okay. This is the government data for Israel confirmed cases July 11th through July 17th. And it has different age groups. And, the folks who are getting, getting the disease, let's look at the percentages, okay? So let's look from the 20 to 29-year-old age bracket. Now, 20 to 29, 441 cases of people who got the Delta variant. 441 were fully vaccinated. 124 were unvaccinated. So the percent of cases of fully vaccinated people, 78%, 78.1%. Percentage of population fully vaccinated in that age cohort of 20 to 29, 71%. Let's go to the next age. Age 30 to 39. Cases fully vaccinated, 481. Cases unvaccinated, 127. Percent of cases fully vaccinated comes out to 79.1% for that cohort. And for that age group, 30 to 39, 77%, 77.4% of that population is fully vaccinated. How about the next age group, age 40 to 49? People with confirmed cases in Israel, 554 people with the Delta variant are fully vaccinated, 113 are unvaccinated. So that means 83.1% of the cases for the Delta variant are fully vaccinated. 80.9% is what that population cohort represents. That's fully vaccinated. So a little higher than its percentage. 50 to 59-year-old in Israel. Confirmed cases. 87.4% of Delta cases, 87.4% are fully vaccinated. And again, the percentage of the population fully vaccinated in Israel for 50 to 59 is 84.4%. Age 60 to 69, 363 people fully vaccinated, got the Delta. Okay. 33 cases got it who were unvaccinated. 91.7% of 60 to 69-year-olds were fully vaccinated and got the Delta variant. 86.9% is what they make up in terms of 60 to 69-year-olds who are fully vaccinated in the population. Let's go to 70 to 79. 70 to 79, 236 people fully vaccinated, got the Delta variant in Israel. 13 unvaccinated got it. 94.8% of those cases were fully vaccinated. And of course, that makes sense. The elderly are the ones that were getting this in higher percentage. But it's still a little higher than the actual percentage of the elderly from 70 to 79 years old that are fully vaccinated. Is 92.8% of the population. 80 to 89-year-olds, 68 fully vaccinated cases got the Delta variant. 8 unvaccinated cases in that age group got and that's 89.5% of the cases were fully vaccinated, and they represent, in that age group, 80 to 89, 91.2% of them are fully vaccinated. 90 plus, 14 cases fully vaccinated, cases unvaccinated, 2. Percentage of the cases fully vaccinated, 84.8%. Percentage of population fully vaccinated in that age group, 90 plus, 89.7%. So, they're just pushing. And meanwhile, they don't want to have any conversation about the evidence for, alternative therapeutics. That's not allowed to be talked about because, again, if something were to come out, the law stipulates that if you have a therapeutic that works, you don't get to have an emergency use authorization to rush out a product without the 10 to 15 years that are required to have a highly qualified, in terms of fully vetted product. And they tell you, no, including Fauci and all the little cultists on TV. They say, you know what? Well, the problem is you guys got nothing to worry about. There's no problems whatsoever. But let me give you an example of why we shouldn't just take a leap of faith just because the TV tells us to. Remember the TV told you to buy a house in 2007, it'll never go down. Then it went down. TV told you weapons of mass destruction were in Iraq, send your kids off to fight that boogeyman. Didn't turn out that way. Ended up unleashing terrorism all over the place in that region and strengthening Iran. They've told us so many different things that turn out wrong. The TV told you any day now you're going to find out that Putin and Russia and Trump were in league together. Why? Because he wanted to have a drawdown of intervention around the world. So that was why they had to turn him into a foreign agent in your mind if you were a TV viewer and believed what you saw. They lie. So I don't trust them when they say, well, you don't have to worry about anything. There's no way possible for there to be any side effects. Don't worry. You have to take this. I look at this story here, published today in the New York Post. Pfizer recalls anti-smoking drug Chantix due to cancer-causing chemical. Pharmaceutical giant Pfizer is recalling 12 lots of its popular anti-smoking drug Chantix after the company discovered the products contain high levels of a chemical that may cause cancer. The voluntary move expands on a recall that covered 9 lots of Chantix, which goes by the generic name varenicline and was issued to warehouses earlier this month. Pfizer said it found N-nitroso-varenicline, which is a type of organic compound called a nitrosamine, and the product at levels higher than the company's so-called acceptable intake limit. Nitrosamines can develop naturally in a broad range of items, including meats, cheeses, and cosmetics. The FDA has warned that long-term exposure to high levels of nitrosamines can increase the level of cancer, can increase the risk of cancer. So, nitrosamines, Pfizer says, are, quote, common in water and foods, including cured and grilled meats, dairy products, and vegetables. So again, they took that off the shelf because of that discovery. So how many people took that product that maybe had too much of that stuff exposed to them? And maybe they could have used something else to solve their problem with smoking, not this potentially harmful product that, of course, got FDA approval, something these products that they now want us to all take, including babies, hasn't even got FDA approval. This one did, and it still is getting recalled off the shelves from Pfizer, same company that's one of the darling companies of your media and government. You have a right to be a human being. Don't let bullies tell you don't have a right to be a human being and choose what you want to do for your life. It's all paper tiger, bluster and peer pressure. It's not science driven. And so you look at this and it continues we continue to see stories. So I mentioned they don't want you to talk about products that are therapeutics, that are generics especially, because that would render the, emergency use authorization, that would render it null, right? You can't get away with emergency use authorization of these novel drugs if there's something else that has had significant effect. The government has refused to do proper research and investigations into some of these therapeutics. One of them, of course, is the infamous chloroquine. I'm looking at this study at NIH.gov, published online August 22nd, 2005. Here's the NIH, same group that Fauci's a part of. It's got a story. Chloroquine is a potent inhibitor of SARS coronavirus infection and spread. They report that chloroquine has strong antiviral effects on SARS-CoV-2, or SARS-CoV, this is the first one, infection of primate cells. These inhibitory effects are observed when the cells are treated with the drug either before or after exposure to the virus, suggesting both prophylactic and therapeutic advantage. In addition to the well-known functions of chloroquine, such as elevations of endosomal pH, the drug appears to interfere with terminal glycosylation of the cellular receptor. This may negatively influence the virus receptor binding and abrogation the infection, and abrogate the infection with further ramifications by the elevation. So it's just going on to this stuff. But the point is that they saw in 2005 that there was some promise with this, but they don't. But you know, when I shared this very NIH.gov link, Facebook put one of their scary little warnings saying, well, you know what? Some unapproved COVID-19 treatments may cause serious harm. Well, they don't say that in this NIH.gov paper, but it's a generic product, so it doesn't have any power in D.C. There's no lobby pushing for people to start using a generic product that doesn't have any profit margins once it's got no patent still on it. So it doesn't, they just turn against it before they've even properly researched it. Meanwhile, there's studies going out. C198CQ.com. Check it out. 8CQ for COVID-19, 265 trials, 4,289 scientists, 388,878 patients. This is looking at all these different trials that have used it. 66% improvement in 26 early treatment trials, 75% improvement in 11 early treatment mortality results, 46% improvement in 6 early treatment RCT results, 22% improvement in 183 late treatment trials, 22% improvement in 41 randomized control trials. Okay? So this is looking at all these different, this is a meta-analysis basically. Here's a meta-analysis that says 100% of the 29 early treatment studies reported a positive effect, 13 statistically significant in isolation for this product. But again, 2005, they were talking about this in the NIH as something to look into. But you see, in DC, BS sells. BS is the game, is the way it works. They never want to admit they're wrong. They never want to take responsibility like adults and people with moral fortitude do. They just want to obfuscate, lie, use their little hyena media outlets to cover their tails. And that has catastrophic, fatal results that affect all of us around the world. And we're going to keep talking about it. I'm David Granosky. We're live on A Neighbor's Choice. We'll take a quick break and return.
David Granosky here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa.
Not attorney spokeswoman.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornosky, your host. We're live on radio. You can call in at 727-587-1040, 727-587-1040, or write a comment on our live stream if you see it. Looking forward to hearing you interview our dear friend and freedom fighter, Amy Povah. That's from Mrs. Meg. Thanks for sending that comment. We enjoy our conversations with Amy Povah, who's a fighter for folks left behind for ridiculous sentencing, criminal justice abuse, and Biden's administration continues to do nothing to help people for nonviolent crimes, life sentences. It's a mess. The lunaticfarmer.com, which is the website of Joel Salatin, who is an iconic farmer for regenerative, local, healthy agriculture. He has a story about Amos Miller. He says, sometimes things come along that need no introduction or conclusion because they stand alone. This is one of those times. I've known Amos Miller, an Amish farmer in Pennsylvania, for many years. He's been faithfully serving his area with good food for a long time, but obviously our friends at the USDA do not take kindly to folks who believe in choice. Read and weep. This is a reminder of the court hearing that is taking place at 10 today, Monday. We would urge our members to participate if it fits your schedule. The USDA is hoping to get permission from the judge to collect fines up to $250,000. If the judge signs the documents that USDA is hoping for, this means that we no longer can have fresh meat available after 7 days and no frozen beef, pork, or chicken after 60 days. USDA wants us to have sold all our current inventory within 60 days. If we don't, they want permission from the judge to destroy the rest of the food. I'm sure this is alarming news for our members. We have many signs and news articles that our members have sent us regarding the drought around the U.S. and Canada that might only produce half of what usually occurs. Plus, many farmers have gone out of business due to monopolized food system and also due to the rules and regulations that USDA is enforcing at this time. I am guessing it will be to no one's liking when food could be a limiting factor. We hope the judge and USDA law enforcement agency, including the lawmakers, will not wait too long to face reality that this could happen. Let's pray for our country. God will be with us till the end. Read in Matthew, the New Testament, the Lord's Prayer, Our Father, which is in heaven. Amos Miller. So he's of Miller's Organic Farm. So apparently another farm that's trying to produce fantastic, high quality. I mean, I haven't heard of the farm till now, but if Joel Salatin is speaking kindly of them, then he's the real deal in that space. The world over, people look at him. And that's what they do. They, people like Fauci, they can fund a dentist level security lab, even though our own government was saying with cables and the State Department, don't do it. And they get treated as the gods of public health as 4 million people die because of the consequences of them funding a dubious security lab in China that ended up wiping out so many people's lives and many more to come because of the consequences of the lockdowns that Fauci also supported. And meanwhile, people can't even grow healthy, high-quality foods to their community without the same government coming in and stamping out people like raw Amish farmers. And I don't know what he was selling, but, that's what they do. You can do a disaster and cover it up, and the media will laud you as a god as 4 million people die because of you foolishly funding a lab that had not had the proper security channels for containing the kind of research they were doing. And the media will turn you and try to turn you into a god among low information people. Those same low information people will then hiss and boo when the same government says, hey, we got another raw milk Amish farmer. Cage him, put him in a cage where violence is rampant. It's a backwards world, but I think millions of people are waking up to this rigged game, and they're saying left and right, both of them are not taking care of our neighbors. They're hurting people. They're criminalizing people selling, local high quality farm products because they threaten the cartels of the food industry, and then they're getting people to eat toxic vegetable oils instead, and they're subsidizing those things, even though the evidence continues to compile that there's a lot of carcinogenic, diabetes-inducing, obesity-inducing, inflammation-inducing problems with these vegetable oils. You see the hypocrisy here? All of it, of course, is maintained by the corrupt press. The corrupt press, their whole thing operates on accusation, which leads me to this quote from Rene Girard. He says, the word Satan originally signifies the accuser. In the Gospels, Satan's power is to make false accusations so convincing that they become the unassailable truth of entire communities. To call this process Satan is highly appropriate. Girard was an anthropologist, so when he speaks about Satan, he's not talking about the character Satan that people think of as red horns and so forth. He's talking about the spirit of the crowd being caught up in lies, being caught up in false accusations to the point where they believe it deeply as unassailable truth. Doesn't that summarize everything we see in our time today? All the problems, accusation, lies that become unassailable truth for communities. That's the way of the world. That's why that's the principle of this world. Accusation, lying, and violence. We've got to do better, folks. We have to build a community that imitates the nonviolent love of Jesus. We'll be back in just a moment with Amy Povah.
Leaving a trail of catastrophic damage up and down the Florida coast.
Storm season is here.
Unbelievable! This storm!
The time to prepare is now.
Hopefully you can all hear me right now. Whipping winds, relentless rain, carving a deadly path.
We'll keep you posted if a storm is headed our way.
And the worst of it may still be to come.
Plus, we'll be with you all the way through it. Your 24/7 news and talk companion. News Talk 1040 WHBO.
After House Speaker Nancy Pelosi rejected two of House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy's recommendations for the Select Committee investigating the January 6th assault on the Capitol, Congressman Jim Banks of Indiana and Jim Jordan of Ohio both voted to overturn the election results. McCarthy then withdrew all the Republican members he chose. One Republican that Pelosi chose is Liz Cheney.
There are three members that the minority leader proposed that the speaker did not object to. She has objected to two members, and the rhetoric around this from the minority leader and from those two members has been disgraceful.
Members say the first hearing next week will go as scheduled. Senate Republicans rejecting an effort today to begin debate on a big bipartisan infrastructure deal.
On this vote, the yeas are 49, the nays are 51. 3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn, not having voted in the affirmative. The motion is not agreed to.
Another update on Wall Street. Chuck Severson, ABC News.
And we're back on A Neighbor's Choice, waiting to see if we can get our guests on with this Amy Povah and her guests that are going to tell us about what's going on with the home confinement story. This is an issue that the Biden administration is not acting on. They're not taking the initiative to do the right thing for nonviolent crimes that don't need to be locked away in perpetuity, and they need to be set home free without strings attached. So that's one of the things that we're trying to focus on is the facts. There's so many people on the television telling us that, the Biden administration is the, justice reform, par excellence group. They're doing such a wonderful job with justice. And that's just not the reality that we see for folks who actually worked in the criminal justice space. People like Amy Povah, who are dealing with people in prison all the time, home confinement. Folks like Rufus Rochelle, who we've had on the program many times, calling in from home confinement. He spent 32 years in federal prison for a first-time nonviolent drug conspiracy with ghost drugs, as he calls it. And they don't change. They don't change the results. They don't change the policy of locking people up and throwing away the key. And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for people who are gullible and believe that this administration cares about justice. I don't think they do. I think their record of, Biden's half a century of trying to basically do whatever he can to protect the prison industrial complex speaks for itself. Of course, it's possible he could do something in this space that's positive, but it's going to take a lot of push because they don't act for anybody except for the establishment crony class. They don't move themselves with any haste to upset the apple cart of the DOJ. And if the DOJ wants those people back in their money-making prison industrial complex machine, they're going to send them back. Basically, people were on they were put on home confinement during the Trump administration as a way of preventing folks from having serious effects with COVID to ease the prison population. They were nonviolent people. They were put on home confinement. And Attorney General Bill Barr issued a memo saying after this pandemic winds down, they need to go back, basically, from what I understand. He was interpreting the law that way. And it looks like the Biden administration, according to the New York Times, is going to kind of basically go along with that. Amy Povah, how you doing?
I'm doing great, David. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it's great having you on again. But, of course, it's another troubling story that's emerging that we have you on. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with this Biden story in the New York Times.
Well, we're all extremely disappointed and distressed, but certainly not as much as the people who are on home confinement, because it's sort of the first red flag that there's trouble in paradise, if you can call it that. Two things. The Biden administration has taken the legal position, his legal team, that the people who are home on the CARES Act must return after the pandemic unless they are within that month time frame that the BLP gives people to stay out on in a halfway house. And they also said they don't want to do blanket clemency because it's too risky. Well, that's strange because people have already been out for over a year. They have jobs. They're going to work. Some of them have leased apartments. We have several. Shanita McKnight, who's working. Rufus Rochelle, who you've had on your show many times. Diana Marquez is serving 30 years for pot. And they're all doing well, and they're the safest group of people because they're short. They were vetted, and by short, what I mean is they don't have much time left on their sentence to begin with.
Right.
So if they're risky, it doesn't bode well that he's going to grant clemency to people who are still in prison.
Right.
So that concerns us.
So joining us today, you've got some guests with us. First, you have with us Lynn. Can you introduce your friend Lynn for us?
Yes, of course. I'm going to have Lynn Esfeo come on. she's somebody who was, the term violated is what you use when the BOP says that you made some kind of minor error and then you have to go back to prison. But fortunately, Lynn received compassionate release short thereafter. Lynn, come on and explain our friend that we're going to be talking about, Raquel Esquivel, and share a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thanks for having me on today, David. I appreciate it. And thanks, Amy, for inviting me on. I'm Lynn Espejo, and I live in Sherwood, Arkansas, and I was released on compassionate release under the CARES Act, May 27th of 2020, and I was taken back in custody on January 12th, 2021, for what the Bureau of Prisons said was me communicating with prisoners that I left behind, for people I'd made friends with when I was serving time, through their Core Links monitored BOP email system. And they revoked me from halfway house home confinement. I was never really at the halfway house, but I was being monitored by the City of Faith halfway house out of Little Rock, Arkansas. And so when they told me to report on January the 12th, they told me I had 2 hours to come to the halfway house. They cut off my ankle monitor, and the U.S. Marshal's Office picked me up and took me into a COVID situation where nothing was being sterilized, cleaned, nothing, to the Pulaski County Detention Center, where I was to await return to prison. I was never found guilty of anything, and in fact, the violation they gave me was a 309 series incident report, which is considered a minor infraction within the Bureau of Prison system, inmate discipline system. And so based on the City of Faith halfway house manual, I should have been given a verbal warning for that. And I would have actually needed 3 different incident reports before being taken back to prison. However, my case manager had supplied me with an email that she called a BOP directive that was put out in December of 2020, around the 3rd or 4th of December, that said any incident report, be it the highest severity level of a 100 series incident report or the lowest level of a 400 series incident report, would go directly to the BOP's discipline mailbox, and the marshal would be picking those people up immediately and taking them back to prison. Mind you, this is outside of the normal inmate discipline policy, where you should be able to go before a disciplinary hearing officer. You have certain rights. You have rights to have a staff representative. You have certain rights. And when the Bureau of Prison violates those rights, there's case law out there that says that they can't really violate those. However, nobody's really, holding them accountable at this point, so they are violating those rights. Currently, I'm advocating for several women. Raquel Esquivel is one of them. Melanie Brandt is one, and Carrie Burrows is another. All 3 of those women were taken back to prison for minor infractions. Raquel has proof she didn't even violate what they said, even though they charged her with a high-level escape charge. What happened with Raquel was she was traveling for her work between job sites. She's from Del Rio, Texas. She was down in a border town where the cell service is very bad, but she works for a drilling company, and part of her job requirements required her to travel with her boss and another co-worker out to different ranches and drilling sites. On March the 4th, Raquel was traveling with her boss and a coworker who witnessed and heard her over the GPS or the Bluetooth loudspeaker talking to the Dismissed Charities halfway house in Del Rio, Texas. At that time, she was reporting that they were traveling from job site to job site. She does have phone records that prove those calls were made, and she was written statements by her boss and the coworker that were involved with witnessing her make the phone calls. Unfortunately, in May of this year, May the 10th, she received a call from the Dismissed Charities halfway house, much like I received a call from City of Faith, and she was told to report back to the halfway house. Her ankle monitor was removed. She was taken by the U.S. Marshals to the Del Rio, I think it's called Detention Center, and that is where she remains. She is 6 months pregnant. The BOP was not at all moved by the fact that she had proof she did not violate, because what they accused her of was not calling when she moved from job site to job site. However, clearly the record she provided proves that that is not at all the case. Melanie Brandt, who I served time with at FPC Bryan, she was violated in March the 1st of 2021. Like myself and Raquel, she had pretty much been home a year at that point. She went, she was working. She was living with her brother. She had reconnected with family, just like Raquel had. Raquel had even gotten custody of her children back. So these people have reintegrated into society, doing what they were supposed to, working. Melanie worked for Unicor within the prison systems while she was incarcerated, and she was working for a similar setup, a call center, after she was released, paying her bills, doing what she was supposed to. Unfortunately, Melanie is a very kind-hearted person, and like me, she left a lot of people behind that she still loved and cared about and got close to while she was at FPC Bryan. And she was kind enough to place money on several of those ladies' commissary books, ladies that she knew didn't really have a lot of family support and didn't get very much money coming in. And as we know, the prisons don't pay you 12 cents an hour, you know, for a job. It's not, basically won't even buy your commissary. But at any rate, she was violated for placing money on the commissary books. And she is now back at FPC Bryan. Carrie Burrows was violated by the same halfway house I was violated from, and she was also charged with escape. Her crime, she was next door at a trailer. It was like a storage trailer on their property, same plot of property that she was on home confinement on. She is a diabetic. She's not getting her medicine, just like Raquel Esquivel is not getting the medicine that her doctor wants her to have for her pregnancy. And Carrie was taken out to the Pulaski County Jail where I was taken, and she now is being held there for transport back to prison.
Wow.
Well, what concerns me the most is Raquel's unborn child and the fact that she's being designated back to Carswell, where Andrea Circlebear passed away after childbirth, and a woman only maybe less than a month ago passed away at Carswell due to COVID. So the pandemic is still life-threatening inside our prison system.
Well, there are still active cases, Amy, at Carswell, as you well know, right now, and that's the ones the BOP is reporting. And as we know, they've been called out by several, journalists for underreporting their numbers. And I do know that I keep up with a lot of women within the federal prison system, and what shows on the BOP website usually is not, as you well know, what they are telling us is really going on within the institution.
Right. I think we're going to have Ricky come on next.
Yeah.
David, which is Raquel's fiance and the father of the child. That we're all very concerned about both Raquel and the unborn child.
Well, Lynn,
So-
Lynn, we really appreciate you coming on. Any final thoughts you want to give to our audience, and we'll keep up with your story.
These are ladies that, and men too, are being violated, that have been home. They've proven themselves for the last year. They should not be taken back. There's no reason for it. They've reintegrated with their families and into society. Some of them have made leases, car notes. They've obligated themselves financially. And these people should be kept home. Something should be done to keep them home. There's no reason to take them back. And I would say that as a mental health professional, it's going to impact their families and them greatly, and it's not going to be better for society. There's no benefit. Raquel Esquivel should be let go immediately. She has a compassionate release has been filed on her behalf, and she is going to be having a baby in a few months. She is a high-risk pregnancy because of her age, and this is her fourth child. and because of the risk of COVID, where she will be taken, and she's 6 months pregnant. So something needs to happen, that she needs to be released back to home confinement immediately. Thanks again for having me on, and I really appreciate it, Amy and David.
Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah, thank
You're
you, Lynn.
just invaluable. Thank you.
We're gonna continue live on our Neighbor's Choice. Up next, we'll hear from somebody else who is going to give their perspective on what life is like for people who were given home confinement because of the deadly pandemic that was raging in the prisons. And now, with the Biden administration not doing anything, they were saying to send people back, even though they're nonviolent, low level. They haven't done anything really in any violent things that I've seen with the cases we're following. So we'll take a quick break and return in just a moment, live on A Neighbor's Choice.
Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, David Gronowski. We're live on radio, podcast, and video stream. If you want to follow us, you can go to our website, aneighborschoice.com, and subscribe there to get our email newsletter where we'll keep you posted on all of our content. Remember, if you're listening live in your radio, that we have online only content that you won't get on radio on aneighborschoice.com. We've got podcasts, we've got small film series that we've started, all kinds of content. It's a library of information that we're very happy to provide for you. And let's look at some of our comments on our live stream. Paul says sunflower and soy lecithin is in the same category as seed oil. Thanks for your time. Another says, Mrs. Meg, her name is Mrs. Meg. She says, as a healthcare professional, I'm adamant, she says, that pregnant women do not belong in prison, especially during a pandemic. What a travesty of justice this is. Amy, please introduce our next guest, because we're dealing with a pregnant woman in prison, aren't we?
Yes, I'd like to welcome Ricky Gonzalez to the program. He is the fiance and father of the unborn child. Ricky, please help us understand the mental toll this is taking on both you and Raquel.
Oh, okay. Hello, my name is Ricky Gonzalez. Yes, it's been a kind of a emotional journey. Ever since May 13th when she was taken into custody. It's been just a desperation battle to find anything I can to see if there's to learn more about her situation. And during that process, I've learned that it's been very difficult to try to get any type of information as far as what's going on with her, if her nutrition. Just being able to get to her took a while. I think she was in quarantine for about 18 days, straight into correction when she went into the facility. So for us to try to get money on her commissary to be able to get the type of nutrition that she needed for our child, being there that she's been there for the 60 days, she's only been able to see the doctor one time. Outside of the facility, before that, it's just been one visit with the nurse practitioner. My concerns, obviously, with the baby and her health have been with, she had a vitamin D deficiency that we learned about maybe about a week before she went in, and we had a scheduled appointment follow-up to be able to get the type of vitamins that we needed for her and for the baby. But obviously, we missed that appointment. We had to cancel 2 appointments outside of here, one being the sonogram. So, I mean, and you can hear it in her voice, the distress and the toll that it's taking on her, the trauma that she's going through, not knowing how the baby is. I mean, being able to hear the heartbeat obviously was able to relieve her of that when she went to go see the doctor, but under the circumstances of having guards in the room and not having the privacy, not just being able to have that emotional experience that she was having prior to all this happening has just definitely been devastating for her and for me as well. And it's heartbreaking to hear her every day and say that the baby kicked, and I'm not being able to feel that personally. And when they did talk to her, they did say that she was measuring a couple weeks lower than what she should be around this time, obviously from lack of the vitamins and nutrition that she should be getting. So all that together has just been very emotional for us and for her family and for her children out here as well.
This is supposed to be a happy time for the two of you, and a time to go through something that is life-altering and beautiful, parenthood, and it adds insult to injury that they violated her 2 months after she supposedly didn't call in because of some kind of audit. It could have very easily have been, and seems to have been, an error on the side of the Bureau of Prisons or the residential reentry folks. And so, it's very frustrating that they will not acknowledge that her phone records show that she did call. Explain, you only get a phone call like once a day or whatever, and it's very expensive. Is that right? And is that the only way that the two of you are communicating?
Yes, I have tried to send letters to her to kind of offset that on the expense part, but so far I've been denied. I don't know if I've been denied, but I've been having the letters sent back. They've been sent back to me. It seems as a technicality on her number. I've written it both ways, 2 different types of ways, one with the dash, one without. So getting to her mail-wise has been, very hard. As far as getting the phone time, that was another, hard thing to set up because we had to set up an account. I had to get the landline going so I'm able to receive the collect calls. And yeah, it's about maybe $4 a call for 15 minutes. Luckily, thank God, I've been able to have some people kind of help out to be able to have money on there so that way I'm able to talk to her at least once a day. But even if that, I mean, like I say, we kind of take for granted what 15 minutes is and how fast it goes by. And when you kind of get into the conversation or start to get a toll of how she's feeling or just try to bring her spirits up, then you get that you have 1 minute left. And kind of like the roller coaster starts to be able to get to the next day. And then there's those days where I don't hear from her where I feel like, I don't know if this is the day she got transferred somewhere. So much uncertainty. And she'll call me the day after saying that the pod that she was in got locked down, so she wasn't able to get to a phone, but there's no way of her having access to us without emails or any type of internet access to be able to send any type of messages. So you kind of have to just wait on the phone call, and I've been just by this phone, just throughout this whole journey.
And what was she?
This is an outrage, and I just have to say that to me, this is borders on torture.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think that we treat terrorists this horrible.
Yeah.
I'm flabbergasted, and I'm so sorry. And all I can do is hope that by getting your story out there, and I know there's a couple of reporters working on it, that hopefully it will draw the attention it needs so that this situation is reversed and justice will prevail.
And Ricky, what was the charge that she was brought in originally? What was the deal that she was serving?
For what she had served time for originally for her sentence?
Yes.
I believe it was a conspiracy charge.
Yeah.
Yes, conspiracy
It was
charge.
a nonviolent drug case, wasn't it?
Drug case. And she had served 11 years already on that one.
So you got
Before
someone
she
who's
was released on the CARES Act, under the CARES Act.
Yeah, it's and you think about this current administration, how many millions of dollars they raised off of police reform and prison reform, and why can't they do something for a pregnant woman like the story you're telling us about? You know.
Yes, and then it seems she kind of gets lost in there because it's so hard to get a hold of her. It's so hard for her to even find out exactly what's going on. 30 days from the time she went in to the time she got the sanction, that was the only type of communication she had with anybody of exactly what was going on. And at that point, it was just a sanction stating that she had been sanctioned, that they had upheld it. So it was just so much uncertainty and just so much just the not knowing and the not hearing. And
well, her mental stability as well,
exactly.
because
and
I can promise you, I would fall apart if I had to go back to prison. You know, I served time too, and I know it would mentally shatter me.
Well, folks, we're out of time, but I really want to thank Amy Povah for bringing these stories to our attention. We're going to follow these stories. And also thank you, Ricky Gonzalez, for joining us. We need to get the word out about her situation, Raquel, and what we can do to get more attention for folks like her left behind. A pregnant woman in the bowels of prison for a nonviolent crime during a pandemic is an atrocity, and the Biden administration needs to be held accountable for doing nothing. I'm David Gronowski. It's a pleasure speaking with you today. You can email me hello@aneighborschoice.com. Godspeed.
Your home for news, talk,